If you're an athlete or the parent of a youth athlete today, you're being lied to. You're being sold fear and complexity and a path that doesn't really exist. I've coached over 6,000 youth athletes in my career. And today I'm going to save you thousands of dollars and years of frustration by breaking down 3 of the biggest myths and lies in the industry today. The first is what I call the ID camp scam. And you see it primarily in soccer, but a little bit in lacrosse as well. And basically, what it is colleges and universities convincing athletes and their families that they have to attend that school's unique ID camp if they want to be recruited. In fact, I've had an athlete who was told by a very big Division I university that they had to go to this camp because, in the words of the coach, we primarily recruit from our camp. BS. That's absolute nonsense for multiple reasons. First of all, the notion, just the whole idea that a university of this size, a program of this caliber, would risk their entire recruiting class on whether or not athletes are available that weekend or can afford to attend that camp is wild. Like, what happens if the 5 best players in the country are on vacation, or if they can't afford to fly out across the country to one of these camps? Is it just, oh well, guess we don't get those athletes this year? No, absolutely not. No. And then even if that were true, that they primarily recruit from their ID camp, that's a huge red flag. And I wouldn't trust any coach who says that, because what they're saying is we prioritize bringing athletes away from their teams, away from their support systems, away from their coaches, away from everything familiar, throwing them out onto a field for a few hours with a bunch of players that they've never even met before, and then forming an opinion on that athlete based on that. That's bad data. That is bad data. That doesn't work. That's exactly why ECNL and GA showcases exist. And that's precisely why hundreds of scouts and college coaches go there, because that's what matters. That's the soccer player. That's the athlete that you're going to get in college. And that's why you should trust your club teams, because for the most part, nearly every GA or ECNL club has resources available to elevate athletes that are in the recruiting process. So the big takeaway is that you need to trust your club. Or if you have a really good high school coach, those too. It just gets a little bit murky sometimes, because with club sports, you typically see your club coach and organization more than your high school one. But there are certain exceptions where you have unbelievable high school coaches who are well connected, who can also help. Trust them. Don't listen to these universities who are trying to pressure you. For the most part, it's just a big cash grab. These universities know exactly who they are recruiting, and they also know who they're not recruiting. And the sad part is that a lot of the people who are attending these camps will never step foot on that campus, and the schools know that. But they still accept their checks, and these families are paying hundreds of dollars to attend these camps, not to mention the thousands of dollars in airfare and food and hotel stays. I mean, it's really skeezy. It would be one thing if these camps were free, invite only, but still free. But of course, that's not the case. And the last thing I'll say on this is, if there are any athletes still listening, I want you to Google Kurt Warner. That's Kurt with a K. And Kurt Warner was a quarterback. He played in college for the University of Northern Iowa, and he was third string up until his senior year. And then when he finally got to play, he did pretty well. He went undrafted in the NFL draft, and he got an invite to the Green Bay Packers training camp, but he got cut before the season. And he just went home to this small town in Iowa and bagged groceries and stocked shelves. And this was more than a decade before social media was even a thought. And guess what? They found him. They found him, and now he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. So trust me, if you are good enough, you are not going to be passed over because you don't go to a camp. That is pressure that you don't need. So trust your club coaches, trust your high school coach, and ball out at your showcases. Now, the next lie isn't exactly a lie in the sense that someone else is telling us something untrue, but it's something that some of us have convinced ourselves is true when it's really not. And I think this is especially important for coaches to hear as well, because I can't tell you how many times I've been speaking to a female athlete about starting a strength program and they hesitate or they balk and they say, well, yeah, but I don't want to get big. I don't want to get bulky, which is totally valid. You know, if strength training turned everyone into a necklace meathead, I could see how that might not feel great for a lady. But that's not the case, obviously. And here's how I go about sort of dispelling this myth. First, it's important to recognize the physiological side of things. So when boys and girls go through puberty, profoundly different things happen. For girls, they get flooded with estrogen, right? What do boys get? Testosterone, all sorts of growth hormone. That's why it's so easy for boys to put on huge amounts of lean mass with relative ease. Now, the important thing to remember is that girls do have testosterone, but significantly less than boys. And just using arbitrary numbers, if we were to say that a boy gets a gallon of testosterone during his teenage years, or has that flowing through his body at any one time, girls have a teacup, all right? So unless you are actively using anabolic steroids and or eating 5,000 calories a day, girls aren't going to get big. A good rule to remember is that boys get big, girls get lean, but they both equally get strong, right? And the last thing that we're going to talk about is one of my biggest pet peeves ever. It is a piece of equipment that I see a lot of Instagram coaches and trainers using. It's very flashy. It kind of looks exciting. It is the sprint parachute or speed parachute. The little harness that you wear with the cable and the parachute that inflates behind it to create resistance to somehow make you run faster. It doesn't work. Do not waste your money on that, all right? As a sprint coach, I can tell you that, especially for youth athletes, very few youth athletes are even strong enough to be able to use something like that properly. And those that do still get no benefit from it because of simply the nature of the equipment itself and the mechanics of the act of sprinting. So think of it like this. When you are sprinting is a pushing activity, right? Not a pulling. It's easier to get yourself up to speed by pushing yourself rather than pulling, which is why the majority of fastest cars in the world are rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, but never front-wheel drive, because it's so much easier to push something up to speed than it is to pull it. So you have to be hinged properly. You have to hinge at the hips. You have to train for a good hip hinge, and you have to be comfortable with that body position. When you introduce a speed parachute that is providing resistance, that is pulling you backwards. So a couple things can happen here. Most of the time for youth athletes, what's going to happen is you're going to be pulled from that hip hinge position to a straight up position. When that happens, you can only land out in front of your body, usually on your heels, sometimes flat-footed. But in either case, you are going to be planting out in front, which is an instant brake pedal. You're pushing yourself backwards as you're trying to move forwards. And you're just planting and yanking yourself forward with your hamstrings, which is not great. Now, the other thing that can happen is you might encounter so much resistance that it pulls you back that you overcompensate by leaning forward even more. And when it comes to sprinting, leaning is the worst thing you can do, okay? It completely reverses the benefits of a hip hinge, all right? And leaning is one of the main reasons why so many younger kids heel strike when they run. Because if you lean forward and bend over at the waist instead of hip hinge, even though you know you're not going to fall over, there's a little voice in the back of your head that doesn't believe that. And it freaks out and it thinks you're going to fall on your face. So it tries to counteract that by tipping your hips posteriorly like you're sitting in a car And then the only thing that you can do then is really heel strike. And then the race is over. Then you have lost. I can't really think of a more overhyped, under-delivering piece of equipment that is a multi-million-dollar industry these days than sprint parachutes. They do not work at all. It's inconsistent. The science does not support it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Spend your money elsewhere. If you want to focus on speed, focus on applying force into the ground. Okay? Sprint, jump. That is what speed is. So to recap, we've covered why you shouldn't fall prey to the scam that is the college ID camp. We've looked at why girls shouldn't be afraid of lifting because they're not going to get big and bulky. And the one piece of equipment that makes my eye twitch more than anything, and why you should save your money and spend it elsewhere. So please, if you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe button. It means a lot. It does a lot for the growth of the channel. And let me know down in the comments what else you want to see. I'll see you next time.